I cannot turn off the casting gene that I've turned on. I cannot. It makes my husband a little crazy because um, we'll be watching a movie and slowly my computer comes over to my lap and I just start like looking them up and then adding them to lists and oh, good for them. Yeah, I thought that they were in this. And he's like, will you please be quiet so we can watch the movie? No, it does not turn off ever. And I fear that my nieces have the same kind of gene as me because they're literally be like, my favorite story with my niece, the older niece, she was 14 at the time, and she was babysitting, and I went over to visit to hang out with her for a little bit. And Shakespeare in Love was on TV, and so I was like, oh, well, this is a good movie. This is about, Shakespeare and the making, potential making of, this play. And then I realized in the middle of it that there was a sex scene, and I couldn't remember the details of the sex scene, and so I was like, oh no, is this gonna be bad? And then the nurse comes in, and she goes, is that Imelda Staunton? At 14, I was like, oh Lord, what have I created? But the great story is that with that is that I got to tell Imelda Staunton's agent that a 14-year-old in the U.S. knew who she was, and she said, oh my God, Imelda will be thrilled. So that's kind of a great thing. Postcards are great, but there are a couple of actors that have sent me multiple postcards week after week that don't say anything new, but just sort of are like, I'm still here, or something like that. And I just think, well, that's a waste of paper and stamps and trees. Just why don't you email me or why don't you, send me a postcard when you're doing something. Yeah, I've had people send cookies and I've had people never naked photos. Thank God. Um, and other things like, creative things to, show that they're however, but I don't know that it helps me remember them necessarily. I mean, yes, it's very nice, and yes, I remember them, but I don't know what to do with that if I don't know if they can act or not. So it just feels like a waste of money. Do staple your resume to your headshot. You would be surprised at how many people do not. And in fact, I have a stapler next to the sign-in sheet so that people will staple their headshot, and you would be surprised at how many people do not. It makes me a little crazy. I think for comedy in particular that you should be off book and that you should say the lines that are on the page. It may be different for drama or things like that, but I just feel like the way I was raised in casting, because it was Frasier and it was so specific, the words were so specific, and so brilliantly written that you said what was on the page. That was what, and I feel like that has carried throughout for me, because also it tends, in particular in comedy, that the people watching the auditions are the people who have written those words. So if you paraphrase or don't say exactly what's there, it sends them off thinking, is that funnier? Maybe that's funnier. And you've lost them watching your audition. So, stay to the page would be my advice. Yeah, I do. Being in the room, because there's a quality when you walk in the room that I get to see who you are and what you're about and what your energy is that helps me sell you to my executive producer, at the time, or Nickelodeon or that sort of stuff. It just helps you make that human connection. I'm the conduit for everybody else who's watching on tape. They can say like, well, what were they like? Were they nice? How would it go? Were they quiet? Were they energetic? What was it? Like what, not on this show, and I don't think anywhere else. I mean, maybe they, of course there's like some like, oh, that didn't work quite well, or but there's also that perfect storm of things that happen too, where in the course of from hiring them that the script had changed, so the role isn't exactly the way it was, when they had conceived it and when we had booked them. There's a lot of things going on. I hate to put the blame and say that it's the actor's fault.
Right.
I tend to start off auditions with, do you have any questions? So I feel like that's the time you said, well, I have a couple ideas, but let me run with one. I said, great. So that I know that you have that, and then I can refer to that, like, okay, well, what was your other idea? Or that was perfect. You don't need to worry about, or, you know, what was your other idea? That's great. Maybe bring that more into what you just did, you know, so that we can have that. So if you, yes, make that known in that. And also I like when an actor sort of makes a choice in making the first choice. You know, it's like, look, I have a couple ideas, but let me just give you the one that I think fits, but I can always be adjusted. That's sort of the great way to start it off. Like, this is play, this is we're playing.